Welcome to the Bold Claims Podcast with your hosts, Matt Danskin, Daniel Roboski, and Taylor Ammons.
Well, basically, it is something I've done. I did 12 years ago, and that's basically you cut these one-way vents, and then you got an exhaust, and you're pulling the moisture in. It might take about 6 months a year, but it's drying that insulation out.
I used those years ago, and it's kind of sold to me by the guy I had helping me out, and he this thing's going to solve all our problems. It's going to be awesome, and I took his word for it, and we did the roof, but I never followed back up. 6 months, a year later, 5 years later. Is the water actually out of the roof, right? Like doing some testing and that type of thing. Have you ever gone back on those to verify that they did what's expected?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how it was, a trial and error thing, and that's kind of so we locked them into like a 2-year service agreement by doing that, so they could do a recover instead of a complete roof replacement.
That's actually a really good point. If you're wanting to get that service contract, that's one more reason that they really need to do that service contract with you.
Because then that guarantees that you're going to be making additional trips out to the property to, like, hey, we're not only going to perform this repair, but we're going to be back 6 months,
doing
12
readings.
months, 18 months, doing readings to make sure that all of this moisture is being removed from.
Because we got a budget sitting out there for a roof recover.
Okay.
Not for a total roof replacement, because the membrane, that's cheap. It's all the component, the insulation, the substrate board, everything like that. That's where you start stacking up the money and disposal of it, and not necessarily I don't like hauling off or spending $800 for a dumpster load to haul off ISO.
Sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So with doing those systems and doing the service agreements, are you primarily service agreement first, or, hey, we need to fix this roof, and then rolling into a service agreement at that point?
We're providing I'd say this is what you need to get your roof up to par.
Yeah.
To get it back in the serviceable condition, and then once the repairs are made, then that's when we enter the service agreement after that.
Okay, that makes sense. And then this is something I don't have a ton of experience in the commercial service agreement world. Like, I talk to clients about it, I see little bits and pieces, but how do you typically price that? Obviously there's going to be variables in terms of the scale of it, or the type of material, or what you've got going on, but is it on just kind of a square price and an annual
I wish
deal,
it was that simple, but I mean, you have some buildings, you have roof drains, perfect walls, some you have gutters. Well, in your service is cleaning out gutters. Well, gutters, I mean, you got to factor that in your inspection report. I mean, I have a little system I have kind of, but I mean, it's nothing plug and play. Basically, I have to train somebody kind of how, but that would be I know some other people have come up with some things, but it doesn't take into effect basically doing the actual gutter cleaning, because that's all part of the service agreement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and majority of your business model is commercial service, correct?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I've been doing the past 15 years. I get the most reward out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily, I mean, financially, yes, but more it's a personal reward when I go out and somebody's had a leak for 10 to 15 years, had 20 people out there try to find it.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I find it in 5 minutes because it's not the roof.
Well, you did that on that Masonic Lodge that I was able to connect you up with, because I think they had 10 or 15 people out there and had paid tens of thousands of dollars in repairs, and it was just continuing to leak. And some of the repairs would hold off for a little while, and then the next spring, boom, the same leak comes back in the exact same spot. And we pulled up, and David looks at the building. He was like, I bet it's going to end up being do you remember the job I'm talking about?
Yes, it was a through wall flashing. It was originally set up for roof originally had a coal tar pitch, which you wanted kind of dead level, and the flashing height was only at, I think, 6 inches above the roof, or the through wall that goes through the brick. Well, when they re-roofed it, we got to go to current building code. Got to go with an R30.
Oh, so they raised the insulation, but they didn't raise the flashing?
No, I mean the flashing is in the brick. It goes through the brick, turns up the back. And I mean, this is a little secret, but there's also an existing building code, and that trumps, no pun intended, but the building code. Like, if you're going to cause more detriment to the building by meeting that R value required, as such in that case right there, you do not have to go back with that R30.
Is that something you have to get permission?
Yes.
From the building department?
Yes.
Is that ultimately like a modification of code, but not really? It's more like, hey, we're not modifying
existing, as long as they have an existing building code in place.
Yep.
It falls back into there.
Does every municipality adopt the international existing building code or some variation, or does that actually have to be adopted by the municipality to be able to be leveraged?
I've not seen one without it. And this is something that I've kept a running tally sheet on every county in Middle Tennessee. Just knowing, just so I know, because I can have one county, Davidson County, Robertson County, everybody's got a different RCC or IECC. And not everybody knows that, and they go by the state.
Right.
Well, I mean, they're forever. I mean, let's see, Sumner County was sitting at still at 2009 when everybody else was at
18.
So if you knew that, I mean, when you're bidding a re-roof, I mean, you go with the local building code.
Yeah, and actually that's like a whole nother rabbit hole that we could go down one day, is, building codes and how they come into play, because Tennessee's kind of funky with all of that. Because they ultimately give you the option to adopt the state program or follow these guidelines, and then you can just have your own, and then you're exempt from the state.
Yeah, then it goes to the county too.
Well, that was something that was interesting. You did all that research. My understanding for the longest time was that, say the state is at 2018, then none of the counties or cities or whatever other municipalities can't be less than that. But because they are exempting themselves from the state, they can, right? So even if the state says, hey, we're modifying code and you have to have ice and water at the eaves or whatever it is, that's all well and good. And if they haven't exempted themselves from that, then that's going to be part of it. But at least with Tennessee, this could be totally different in other states. That they were allowed to not do what that requirement by the state. That just blew my mind, because everything in code is whatever's the strictest.
Yeah, most restrictive governs. Yeah, because that's ultimately what triggered me to go down that rabbit hole. Was in Tennessee, Williamson County adopts that ice and water shields required on the eaves.
Oh yeah, and then you have the city within the county.
I was within the city limits of Franklin, which is in Williamson County. And so I was over here pushing that this is required, and come to find out, because I'm like, well, the city can't be less restrictive than the county that it's in. And sure enough, it can, you know, in the state of Tennessee. But I went all the way to the state building department and was like, make this make sense. And he was like, you know, and I actually recommend that to a lot of people out there, is like, go to the state level when it comes to building codes, and then work your way backwards and like find out how your state actually requires the building codes to be enforced and how they work, because, you know, every state, I agree with you, is going to be different. And so, you know, go to the state level and really know, like, don't just go to what's that roofing code and trust what people in the comments are saying, because people have no clue.
And that's going back to codes. And that's one thing I've noticed, is that the further out you go, the less restrictive they are on codes.
Yeah. Yeah, especially when, Billy Bob, the building official.
Yeah, and historically, they didn't have any type of codes really enforced. And by, you know, you can, you know, go around and round about what enforces. But, I mean, even there's entire states where they just did not have a code, a building code. I dealt with this years ago when we did structural warranties for home builders. And
what state was this?
All over the country.
Oh.
But like South Dakota, I guess is the state, like guys were like, hey, we want to get a warranty. And we're like, there's no inspections. There's no adopted code for the state. You know, and this is whatever, 15 years ago.
It's structural. South Dakota with snow.
What's that?
With snow loads in South Dakota?
Not for the entire house construction.
Okay.
So you could build a house and...
You could build a house however you felt like. You could stack up a pile of pallets and call it a house. And so...
There's a bunch of those in Nashville on the side of the road.
Sure. But it was wild because, you know, people are building legitimate houses.
Yeah.
And like, hey, I want a warranty on this. Well, you can't get one unless you do inspections, and you have to find like a third-party independent inspector that can go out and do it, and, you know, pay them a fee or whatever.
Yep.
And they can do a building code inspection, even if there's no building code, if you want to do that as a property owner or whatever. But there were people just building awful stuff that was falling apart in a few years.
I can imagine.
A lot of guys there was, I think, oil and natural gas type stuff, and they'd go build these houses for these guys to live in. And they were falling down and, you know, getting blown over and all sorts of nonsense from, you know,
it's the Wild West.
I'm very much, you know, kind of against government regulation or whatever, but there's some things where it's like there needs to be something here. Yeah, like
at least a bare
just
minimum.
for the public safety or whatever. You know, these are, you know, oil guys out here living in a shed or whatever. Right. But at the same time, like, there's families that they're going to have the house collapse on them because nobody's checking to make sure that the framing's done right.
Well, and that's why I get so particular when I'm doing re-roof jobs on older houses and it's got really thin plywood or something like that. And I'll be dealing with a carrier and I'm like, look, I understand that you think I just want to do this for the money, but where my mind really is a 220-pound jacked firefighter with 75 pounds of gear has to come rescue a family from a house fire, and he falls 20 feet through this house and splats on the floor and doesn't go home to his family. That's more my concern. Like the profit that we get on the back end, like that's cool. That keeps us in business. But what's more important to me is that in the event that there's an emergency, everybody's going to be okay to do what they have to do.
I mean, even the homeowner themselves say they clean their own gutters. You could possibly be liable if they were to fall through their roof and you didn't change out that faulty plywood. I don't know how that would end up in court, but that would very likely end up.
Not trying to find out either.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's definitely not worth it.
And you know, many roofs where just it's either been roofed too many times, or the older glues and the plywood, they just don't hold. They just get baked.
Yep. Yeah, because I mean, at some point that stuff wears out.
And then you go back in your attic ventilate. I mean, if it ain't ventilated, I mean, it just cooks the glue.
So I'm curious from the commercial perspective, like you're going through, doing service contracts and all that sort of stuff. And I know there's a big push this last decade or so for coatings. And I think that's been done well. That's been done poorly, like anything, right? But what's your take on the different coatings out there and their efficacy and that sort of thing?
Coatings can be great. There's many different coatings, and there's a reason why. Because there's not one coating in this area is the right fit for every. I mean, some manufacturers have one product. It'll work for everything. And let's see. I mean, you got your urethanes, your silicones, your different types of urethanes, your aromatics, your apathetics. I said that a little bit wrong, but and you got your acrylics. And now you have you got some modified silicones that have a urethane in them, which I found that are kind of one of the better ones, but that's for repairs. But the biggest thing is, does that roof have more moisture in it?
Right.
And
now you're locking it all in.
Right. And you're sealing it in, and it's gonna find its way out.
Mm-hmm. And
it's gonna find a way out by blistering that new coating you just put on.
Yeah.
But and the Regis, I mean, I don't really. Coatings to me is you didn't get by for 5 years.
Just Band-Aid it. Yeah.
Get the budget in there. I mean, I know they offer warranties on coatings and everything like that, but I've never been much of one to actually try to sell a coating warranty.
Sure.
Because, I mean, it's all about the surface prep.
Can you coat over a wet deck? Like, because I know building codes, you can't do a roof recover over wet decking, but if you have wet ISO or something like that, can you still coat that, or do you have to get that out?
I mean, you can coat anything. Is it going to work?
Well, I'm saying as far as like code compliance, would you be allowed to do that? Obviously, I would imagine most good contractors like you would want to get that wet decking out.
That's the thing about codes, though. Coating is a paint. It's not a roof.
Right.
So there's no codes involved when it comes to doing a coating.
That's why that kind of makes sense, though.
Yeah.
You're doing a.
But it's a terrible business practice to paint a roof with a waterproof coating when there's already water underneath it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Now, like we was talking about before, if you use that in combination with a ventilation system, but still the product's got to be right. The prep's got to be right.
Sure.
Your roof is made. They call it a roof system, but it's a site-made roof system.
Yeah.
It's not in a controlled environment. I love coatings.
What are your thoughts on for a roofing sales guy, right? And I see so much guys will start in residential, they'll see the big money in commercial, right, and want to make this switch over, and don't necessarily go through the process of learning completely different systems, right? Because you can learn how to install an asphalt shingle roof in a day or two, and manufacturers will vary a little bit. There's different applications, whatever, but like if you really wanted to, you can learn it pretty darn quickly.
Yeah.
With commercial, especially because a lot of times these buildings are lasting for a long time and they're getting multiple roofs over their lifetime, and sometimes they're stacking them up and all this type of stuff. Like the complexity just goes through the roof, right? Like there's different types of systems, different types of insulation, different combinations of different features and all that sort of stuff. Like how do you obviously for service work, somebody like you is hugely valuable to the property owner because you actually know what you're doing, right? There's 100 guys out there that are, hey, let me sign you up on a claim and I'll get my PA out there. And like, I may never even visit the site and it wouldn't help if I did, right? There's 100 of those guys for every guy that actually knows what the heck they're doing.
Yep.
And so how do you approach I guess, the market in terms of like, hey, I actually know what I'm doing. I actually know how these systems work, and what I'm doing costs money, but it has value, and it's not just let's send this thing to the moon.
And that comes down to I don't do anything for free. I come out and do an inspection. There's going to be a fee to it.
Sure.
And that usually separates. And believe it or not, a property owner, especially a commercial property owner, they're going to take that paid for inspection with a lot more weight than they ever are a free inspection.
Yeah. Well, and because they get a lot with it, especially if they use somebody like you, because I mean, I've used you and seen some of your reports that you put together, and they're pretty gnarly. I mean, I don't know that there's many people that can, go head to head with the type of reports that you put together.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, I'm an advocate for the customer. I mean, I'm working for them, and when you're getting paid, I mean, you do have that time to actually look into it, do a more thorough inspection and inspecting a commercial roof is not something you learn. Just like you said, it's not something you learn overnight.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many different systems, so many different, I guess that's been my hardest issue when doing insurance claims in commercial, because Xactimate does not have what it's supposed to have when it comes. There'd be no way it could even have all that, everything you need, all the different types of materials out there. And so, I mean, maybe I've been lucky, but typically when I go out there, adjuster basically tells me what I need to put down.
Yeah.
Is this close enough? Kind of, I mean, that's because a lot of times they necessarily don't. They're used to running residential claims. And
yeah, I mean, on the same note, like adjusters oftentimes don't understand a simple residential claim.
Right.
And so they get on a commercial deal, which typically that's going to be an adjuster who's, has more experience, a little bit more seasoned or whatever, but still.
And it's usually a actual employee of the company.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's, I think that comes with the scale of it. If I'm, some of these roofs are millions of dollars, right? I don't want to outsource that big of a decision to a third party that might mess it up. I want to, make sure I know the guy that's, going to go make that decision. So,
yeah. And I would imagine the carriers probably do everything in their power to avoid taking responsibility for whatever damages are up there. I know one thing that I was curious about, because I know you had mentioned kind of residential sales and then into commercial sales, but a lot of these guys get into the roofing industry because they can make life-changing money, and then they decide they want to transition into the commercial side of things because they have a much bigger ticket on these things. But you've mentioned like the relationships can take a lot longer to actually turn into a project, as opposed to a residential door knock. I can potentially have my commission hit within 30 to 90 days depending on the claims process. But if I go get into commercial, I may develop a relationship tomorrow, and we may even start working on a project tomorrow, but I might not get paid on that for a year, 2 years.
Right.
So what are your thoughts kind of surrounding that? Because it's definitely not a get rich quick thing by any means.
No, you got to have, and that's what I mean. I like the service model. I mean, you don't go after you don't try to eat the whole cow. I'm one that does not like the word salesperson. If you're up there, you're conducting an evaluation, you are a consultant.
Yeah.
That's just, you have your quote unquote RSCs or your all your stuff. But if you're consulting, if you're basically influencing somebody to what they need to do with the roof, you're not selling them. If you're doing it right, you're consulting them on what is in their best interest, not necessarily what is in your best.
Yeah.
And that's what builds that relationship.
Yep.
So you might work a year just doing maybe 5 or 10, $1,500 not to exceed repairs, but then you also, if you get them in the service agreement, do your inspections, you start writing their budgets.
Yep. Well, and I was going to say that's another thing too, because I know you've mentioned to me that on a lot of the properties that you have relationships with, you kind of have prior approval to go ahead and actually perform some repairs while you're doing your annual inspection or something like that. Like, the corner of this AC unit curb is flashing, and so we need to, or flashing is leaking, so we need to fix that little piece of flashing there. And as long as it's not going to exceed a certain dollar amount, they're usually good with you going ahead and doing those, right?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I try to always get a not to exceed.
Yep.
And I've even done that in residential. And
do you have like a set price list of, generally, if we need to go do this, it's going to be between this and this, or it's going to be to like just give them almost like a menu of, this is what you can expect if I need to go out and do stuff. I'm going to, not exceed this budget without talking to you, but I'm going to document what I'm doing and I'm going to do it, and then I'll send you the bill.
Well, to send a 2-man crew on to a job site to look at a leak, you need to at least have $800 to even pull up on the job site. And so that's you go find the leak, boom, you able to fix it in and out 3 hours. And that's including driving there. So
yeah.
Because when you're doing service, you're charging port to port. There's no time. You can't really. There's no free time.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to explain to customers on the not to exceed. I was like, I can go out there and give you a quote. I can do this. You want to get multiple quotes, or I can go out there and send a crew out there, and we can actually go and fix your problem. I'm not going to have to charge you for going out there.
Yeah, I don't need to come back out. Yeah. Let's do it.
I don't need your problem's fixed, especially in industrial. This line you have that's down, that's not producing well, so you're able to go ahead and get it fixed right now. You explain it to them that way.
Yeah, it's very valuable. Yeah.
I mean, I got one client. I mean, it's one client alone. We have a not to exceed of $5K, and
nice.
So, I mean, I'd like to do that. I mean, that's my approach to it. But then, I mean, I don't have a big sales force. I like to train my technicians on how to actually observe and be there, look out for the client's best interest. And that's when you're there, go ahead and also inspect the roof too.
Right.
And you're getting paid to do that inspection.
Yep. I know one thing that I was curious about, and, I try and ask guests when they come on, especially if they have a spouse or somebody that works in their business. So how do you navigate life and business, like particularly within your marriage, when, you and Amy are working together, living together? Like, how do you make sure that you maintain a good, healthy relationship, and then know where to separate all of that and then still be able to, have a good relationship?
See, okay, Amy and I have a really unique situation. We actually met at work. She was a service coordinator, and then moved up to office manager at a large commercial roofing company that I was like a branch that I was the general manager of. And we actually met in the business. So, but fast forward that to now that we have our own business, it's a little different. Because then no matter what, you're getting your paycheck and this and that, and then, it is very hard. And you definitely have to set the boundaries. And
so boundaries is big.
Like, after a certain time, no talk about work. I mean, getting a huge storm in the middle of the night, and
right,
you're getting calls, but
yep,
I mean, that's a whole different story. But it is tough. It is tough.
Yeah, so definitely like defining those clear boundaries. Have you ever had to have like a really difficult conversation, like maybe you messed something up and so she had to pull your card, or she messed something up and you had to have ultimately like a owner to employee type conversation, but it's with your wife?
Yes, that is one of the hardest things in the world to do.
Yep.
Either side.
Wow.
Because we're both owners in the company. She's majority, but
so she'd give you the boot.
Yeah, in a couple ways.
Yeah,
but
yeah. So what advice do you have for people out there that are kind of in that position? I know you had mentioned boundaries, but when you do have to have that difficult conversation, how do you approach that?
First, I mean, that ounce of prevention. And that's just in which I'm saying this, but I'm not always the best at it. And that's basically, I mean, we put spending limits in place and stuff like that. I mean, if you're spending more than $500, need to know kind of thing. Mm-hmm. What's it for? Justification. And really, it's just trying to prevent getting there. That's the biggest thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because typically when it gets there, it's not a good thing.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah.
I want to take a break and check out a video.
I submit.
You guys haven't seen this one.
I
think I sent this to John a couple of weeks ago, and so it's almost like a refresher for me. But I want to get your take on this.
They quoted us over $10,000 to do our roof when the materials alone were only $3,500. So you got me all the way effed up. We'll do it ourselves. This was the before we had a really bad storm and a tree had dropped, but we got to work. My daughter even helped us, got up there and started getting all the shingles off. And if you're going to do this yourself, here's kind of a list of what you need. You also need to go to a building material place and have them help you get all the stuff that you need. Start on one side at a time. Do not do the whole entire roof at once, because if it rains, you need to be able to tarp one side of your roof. But once you get all of your shingles off, which, believe me, takes a lot of work. It's not easy, okay? It is hard work. Once you get all of your shingles off, though, you're going to put this underlayment around the perimeter of the roof. So that means that you're literally just putting this around the edge of the roof, okay? And again, you're going to use those orange cap nails to put this down. And once it's down, you tear off the backing of it because it's sticky on the back, okay? And once it gets hot, it'll stick. So then we're going to put our synthetic felt down. You want this completely straight, okay? You're going to overlap it to the other line and nail it into place with the same orange cap nails. Let me tell you to take your time on this. Push out all of the bubbles and make sure it is straight. It will help immensely when you put your shingles down because it kind of acts like a guide. But you want to make sure that nothing punctures this because this is your waterproofing, okay? This is what your roof will look like once you take out all of the vents and pipes and all of the shingles are off, okay? And then this is what this looks like once you have the synthetic felt all completely straight and together. You start with starter shingles going around the perimeter of your roof. You want them to hang just a little bit off of the roof, like 1/4 of an inch. Okay. Then you line your first row of shingles up with that starter shingle. And here is kind of how you can nail. It's really up to you of what you feel is secure. And this is the most important part, is whenever you start your first row, you will use a full shingle. Then from there, you have to cut 10 inches off. The next row 20 inches off, the next row 30 inches off, then use a full row again, okay? This is what gives it that staggered look, okay? Yeah, okay. There's so much more that I could say about this also, but I'm trying to fit this all into a short version and just to kind of give you an idea of what it looks like to put a roof on and that you can do it yourself. It is insane the prices we're paying people when there's the school of YouTube. We took that underlayment and brought it all the way up over the peak to ensure more waterproofing.
What's going on there?
We did
Is that
this
like
with
a
the synthetic
little
felt as well. We
almost like a roof to wall, or like a transition type thing?
Why did they remove the
first or
pipes?
second row, like it really
It
just
looked like
starts
they
to
had the
move
pipes
along.
No,
completely
she
Starts to get
said they removed the
repetitive.
pipes.
I wish I had gotten a better video of when we put our pipes and vents down, but just know if you go on YouTube, there is such in detailed videos on there that can help you. It is
Probably
insane.
need to have
Okay?
a little better
If you
channel
want a little
behind
better
that.
look of how I put the
flashing
shingles
there.
down, I
Needs
lined
a
them up at the
storm
top of
collar.
wherever that square was. I'm not really using the white lines. Yeah, they're there, but just know that
So
they're
where they're
not
supposed to
even,
go.
okay? And if you use that white line, they're not going to be even. Okay, so when you get to the end, you're going to have to cut these off even with that starter shingle, okay? Now, depending on whether if you're redoing your gutters or not, if this applies to you, but I just kind of wanted to show it in case that this is called drip edge. That all depends if you're putting on new gutters or not.
I bet it took them a
Also, here's a
month.
better look of when we put the vents on.
But it
again,
doesn't
if you
look
need
bad. You know, they
detailed
look like they're doing a
versions,
really
there's
good
little
quality
tight on the
roof.
side of that.
Okay.
Yeah, so
This
yeah, a
is
little
just to kind
tight.
of give you an idea and make sure
You
that
know,
you
no
cut
ice and
along
water around
them
those
to make them all pretty
penetrations.
looking
No.
whenever you get it said and done.
It's
Now,
dark
whenever
again.
you get to the very peak of your house, this is where you will put the ridge cap on, okay? Make sure that your final row hangs a few inches over the peak, okay? You're going to start your first ridge cap just like a 1/4 inch hanging over. We chalked a line to make sure that we stayed straight all the way down, but you want the
They're
same
using blue
space
chalk. I
between
like it.
each one. There is a guide on it, okay, where that little nick is, but we just cut a piece of a shingle just to make it go faster. But you totally don't have to. You can just line it up on the nick that's already on there. But whenever you lay your shingle on top of this, you're going to nail it into the top right here where I'm showing you. Whenever you put your other one on top and you nail it into the top 2 corners, you're going to basically be hitting the underneath of it in those 2 spots. So it's double securing it. Now you can either do 1 row of the
But hey,
ridge
if they
cap
wanna save
shingles,
that
or
money.
you can do 2. I think 2 looks better.
They have a
and
lot
it's
of
more
time on their
protection,
hands.
But when you do the second row, you have to do it in the opposite direction, okay? And then you have
they
a
kinda
finished roof. And
did a
by God, we
at-home,
saved over $6,000
high-profile
doing it
ridge cap.
ourselves.
Yeah,
And I tell you
just
what,
did-
there is no better feeling than standing back,
did the ridge
looking at
twice.
something
Thank
that you
God
did
they
yourself
did
and
it themselves and
accomplished.
saved
Nothing
$6
feels
grand.
better than that, okay? My whole point of this video, though, is to just show
Man.
you that you can do it. It is possible. And on
I
YouTube,
value my
they
time too
show
much.
everything in depth of how you can do things yourself. Don't be scared. Try new things and learn
Just
a
don't
new
watch
trade.
this video.
Right. Yeah, I definitely don't disagree that, anybody can go through and do the project themselves. They clearly have some sort of, construction background or experience at the very least.
I think this lady does a bunch of videos of doing little handy projects around the house or whatever.
Yeah.
Which, as sad. So if you watch the video closely, there's a bunch of technical things that immediately you're fired, tear that roof off. There's no way I want my name on it. Whether that's the 1 course of ice and water at the eave.
Yep.
Or not doing the penetrations, or, shingling to, things that are too tight, or the overhangs, or there's a bunch of things that it's but at the same time, I've seen professional roofers do a worse job than that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely some guys that are installing here in Nashville that could benefit from watching that. But again, clearly, obviously, they've got time on their hands, but, anybody that's ever torn anything off and reshingled it or done any of that, it's pretty tough.
It is. I mean, I think the major thing
As far
for
as
somebody,
labor,
for a homeowner
physicality.
watching that, I think it's that can look really enticing of I got this $10,000 check from my insurance company. It's $3,300 of material. I can pocket $6,000 or, minus my deductible or whatever.
Yep.
I can get this just doing some work myself. It'll take me 2 days, but $6,000. Hey, I'll make, $3,000 a day. Which what they're going to find out is it's probably not going to take them 2 days. It's going to take them 7.
Right.
Also,
full days.
Yeah, that contractor is insured. So if a storm pops up and it absolutely obliterates their house,
Yep.
they're covering it instead of your homeowner's policy may not even cover you if you personally took a roof off and drowned your house.
Correct.
Like, and I think theirs was pretty simple, right? They didn't have a lot of cuts to it, not a lot of valleys, and all these things.
Wasn't very steep.
They didn't have rod-end decking. They didn't have like all these things that we know to look out for and we know how to address.
Yep.
So I just think it can look really appealing to go, hey, there's $6,000 here. Until you get into the details of, I'm risking my most valuable asset.
Right.
My $500,000 house might get completely destroyed because I'm trying to save $6,000. But also there's a bunch of stuff that could come up that I'm not going to know how to deal with, or I'm going to deal with wrong like she did.
Yep.
And then now your entire project is sunk.
Not to mention safety.
Yeah.
Correct. I mean, thankfully that looked like it was probably
it was like a 412.
412.
Yeah.
And really it might have
story.
been less than a 4 and probably should have had double underlayment. Because that slope didn't look. It realistically actually looked like probably maybe a mobile home or just a simple up and over gable with a very low pitched roof. But I mean, if you've ever started tearing off even like a 612, 712, 812, it can get a little.
Well, I mean, to the point for us,
you're high up off the ground.
We look at a 412 and go, that is, I can do cartwheels on it.
Yep.
That's super easy. But for someone who's not used to being on roofs and you're up there working for 2, 3, 4, 5 days, there's a lot of opportunities that you could fall off. And,
correct.
And still get hurt, even though it's like, to us, the safest of roofing conditions, it's still not safe for somebody who's not acclimated to working on roofs.
And at nighttime.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
that was probably for the heat.
It could have been. That's
what I thought. They did.
Do you know where they were from?
No, I don't. I think they probably did one daytime shift, and they were like, "This is for the birds. We're doing this after the sun goes down."
Yes, but I mean, good for them. I bet they, had a good time, and at least they can tell stories about how.
Yeah, she probably made more on
this.
the content than the, just because that video went viral. That had
did it?
Tons and tons of views. Yeah, she probably made more on the video than the roof would have cost.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I mean, anybody can technically do any roof that they want to do, but again, if that roof starts leaking, they don't have anybody they can call. When you call a reputable, licensed, insured company, Roof Solutions, Paragon, anything like that, if that thing starts leaking, you just pick up the phone and say, "Hey, we've got an issue." Yeah. But if, and that's even why I have no issue telling my clients that you can 100% take the insurance check and get on Facebook and find labor. You can call Home Depot or even some of these distributors and have the material brought out. But, if you just hire some guys off Facebook, there's a taillight warranty. The second their taillights are out of sight, they're done.
Well, and like I said, I've seen professional roofers do a worse job than that.
Yep.
And the guys that are just here and I'm going to be bottom dollar, that's going to be your cheapest guy,
Yep.
Least performing guys typically.
Mm-hmm.
That's so the other thing she mentioned was hey, you can get on YouTube and learn all this sort of stuff.
Yep.
I have seen so many YouTube videos instructing people wrong how to do stuff. We've got, I did a video with Phil Knopfzeiger years ago on installing step flashing into the brick.
That's a good video.
Flashing. That video has, I want to say like 500,000 views with like an average 5-minute watch time.
Oh, that's awesome.
Crazy. It's a 15-minute long video, but
right.
It was one of those things. There's very, very few places that show how to do that.
Correct.
But we've had so many people sit there in the comments and tell us that we did it wrong.
Yep.
Right. And
it probably couldn't be done more right.
Correct. Yeah. And not to say that we never make mistakes or whatever, but that was done right. And there's still 1,000 comments telling us why it's wrong.
Yep.
But you've got videos, all sorts of videos on the internet showing you how to do something wrong.
Yep.
And there's going to be comments telling you how great it is and that it's
100%.
wrong and everything else. So for that consumer who doesn't do this professionally to go, okay, what YouTube video am I going to watch? Which one am I going to trust to tell me how to properly install this thing.
Yep.
And even, we did the BEI instructional videos.
That's what I was going to say.
Because the installation videos, a lot of times from manufacturers, you would think, hey, this is the end all be all truth.
Yep.
Which they don't make mistakes on here's how to install our shingle.
Yep.
But they don't show you how to flash things that,
yep.
That now you're introducing something that's not part of their product.
Yep.
They don't show you whether or not you need a cricket or how to
Correct.
build that
yeah,
cricket.
They don't care.
Or, right. Like I'm going to show you all the things related to our product.
Yep.
And here's exactly how to do this. But 99 times out of 100, you go onto a roof and there's going to be something that falls outside that scope of what the shingle manufacturer is going to tell you how to do.
Yep. Yeah. I would be curious where that is. It'd be cool
then
to look at it.
Just the whole misleading. I just don't get it misleading. Why are you going to spend well, I mean, they kind of leave it to the pros, or people that.
Yeah, because I definitely. Yeah,
I mean,
know exactly
I would like to see this fortune. Is this a pot of gold? That, I mean, it's a lot of sweat, a lot of hard work.
Oh yeah,
we put in to get to where we're at, and it's not just they're just getting rich.
Right. Yeah. Well, and anybody that watches that video and thinks like it's going to be super easy to go do a roof, I mean, just try one.
Start with the doghouse.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Definitely.
Well, I told you, it was a couple of weeks ago. I went and did that chicken coop.
Yes.
And I was like, all right, I'm just
sorry I missed that.
Yeah. I was needing a lifeline. It was 3 squares.
Yep.
Right. And the decking was all completely rotted. Which the fun thing about it was that the chicken coop was down below, and I basically had to take all this rotten decking off from up top, which gets a little bit dicey. And I mean, by like the decking was bad, like it's like coming apart in handfuls.
Oh
right?
yeah,
like it's just completely.
Was it OSB or plywood?
It was OSB.
Oh, even worse.
And then the roof wasn't done properly 25 years ago when it was done initially, and it's got
been leaking ever since.
Yeah, it's been leaking since the first time it got rained on, and it's full of bugs. I got attacked by wasps and all this sort. Which it was 3 squares, and I've installed roofs, right? I haven't done a lot of my career of like being an installer, but I've installed roofs before, and I've overseen crews installing roofs. I've been on tons and tons of roofs. And I still underestimated how much effort it was going to take for me to by myself redeck this chicken coop and reshingle the thing. So luckily I got the 2 squares of it torn off, redecked, dried in, and then I called some buddies up and I was like, all right, help me knock this thing out tomorrow.
Yeah, let's get this done.
I got a sunburn and about got dehydration on a 73-degree day.
Right. Well, I did the exact same thing the other day. It was like an 18 by 17 little I guess lean-to type thing.
Was that when you invited a bunch of guys out to?
Yeah. And so was able to go through and do that, and it was way hotter than I expected it to be, and then it took me a lot longer than I expected, but we were able to get some really good educational content out of it, and a couple guys came out for a little while, but I ended up running short. It's an hour from here, and I ended up running short probably like half a bundle of shingles, maybe 1 bundle of shingles. And so, I've actually just sent some of my guys down. I was like, hey, just go get this finished up, because we just had to break a piece of apron flashing to get back up under the siding there, and then pop in a little piece of J channel because it had vinyl and he tied right into it. Kind of butted it right up to it, so I just ended up taking my oscillating saw and just cut the vinyl across so that I could wrap my ice and water shield up there, minimum 5 inches, just to make sure that everything's going to be all good at that area. And so, I mean, again, anybody can go through and do that stuff, but I wouldn't recommend it.
You're about to learn how hard it is.
Yeah. Yep.
School of Hard Knocks.
Oh yeah, that's a fact.
But if anybody wants to try it and wants an apprenticeship, wants a free day to learn, let me know.
Oh, is Roof Solutions offering? Hey.
Yeah, come on.
I love to train.
Yeah.
Well, that would be cool. You know, you got the farm out there. You know, so
no, take them out on some real sites and have them do some real work.
Yeah.
I used to. So when I was in Denver, I had
it's called apprenticeship.
I had guys that would reach out to me from other companies, and they're like, "Hey, dude, you know, can you teach me what you're doing? That's whether it's on the sales side or the repair side or whatever, you know." And I'm like, "Yeah, come on, you know, you're going to carry my ladder, you're buying my lunch, but yeah, you can come, you know, let's do it." So the you know, I guess that's something I usually tell guys if they're like, I'm not getting education where I'm at. It's like, one, either invest into yourself, or two, go work somewhere where you can get educated.
Yep.
And, you know, if you're not getting educated, maybe just go talk with some of your competitors that can help you out in that capacity. And you might decide you want to go work with them.
Yeah.
And why are you wanting to get educated?
Well, yeah, I mean, if they're wanting to get educated, that's the first good thing, right?
That's the first good thing. But then, yes, is it purpose driven? Is it money driven? Is it, I mean, do you just want to be a better person, better at what you do, or is it solely?
I think if it's purely money driven, right, they're going to be focused on, I want sales education.
Yep.
Right. And you can get I'm not saying sales education is bad inherently or whatever, but that's all you're going to be interested in. That's something I've found with doing BEI. We're doing all this technical training. The guys that actually care about, like, hey, I want to make sure I know how to install this thing right, so I install it right. Right. Like, I want to make sure that I do a good job for my customers. They're the ones that are interested in the technical stuff, because they don't want to make mistakes. They want to be a professional. They want to know how this stuff works. You know, even though there is a lot of money, if you understand the claims side of things really well, you can make a bunch of money. You can be a PA, right, and never install a roof.
Yep.
You can be a building consultant and not actually installing anything, but that technical knowledge is still so valuable for you. But again, it comes from a mindset of, I want to do these things right and I want to serve my customers well. I think if your only thing is, I want to make money, you're going to do the cheap and quick and easy. Let's, you know, snake oil, sell somebody on something and not actually.
You're not, as I go back to my previous comment about being a salesperson or being a sales consultant or whatever, you're not being a true consultant. You're not doing your client justice.
Right. Well, and again, there's nothing wrong with sales, right? But being that consultant that knows what they're doing and has that customer's interest first, you end up making so much more money with that mindset than just let me screw over this customer so I can make some money.
And one customer turns, it's the multiplier.
Yeah, they become your sales force for you.
Yeah, correct.
Right? Because you're the expert that actually knows what
that
you're doing.
was where I was going back into leading into training your service guys, because then you don't really need, you might need some business development, but I mean, they're out there doing the actual reporting the issues, and all you're having to do is get input stuff in the software and write a proposal. And
love it.
Yeah. Well, and even just the simple fact of being able to, like, hey, who do you know, or do you, if you've got any friends or family that ever, need any roofing help or anything like that, I would love the opportunity to have an introduction and see what I can do to help. It doesn't have to be any high pressure stuff, Well,
I think property owners, they talk to each other, right? And they have the same pain points as one another. And so they're going, all these jacklegs want to come up there and tell me to file a claim, and they haven't, properly inspected this or really shown me, I don't know what the heck's going on. I don't know what to do. I don't know how this is going to affect me. And they go, oh, I've got a guy, he'll take care of it. Like, he'll lead you the right way. He'll document everything. He'll, whatever. Oh, okay, cool. I'm going to go with that guy.
Yep.
Right. And so whether it's homeowners or property owners, they're, that's so valuable to just be the expert that they can trust and people need.
Yep.
And going back to like service calls, I mean, you get calls. I mean, I would say it's average probably 60 to 70% of roof service leak calls we get are not actual roof failures. It's either damage to the roof or it's leaking from a HVAC. You got a pan filling up because your shut-off's not working inside your heating air unit, causing it. Well, it's only does it when it or you got negative pressures pulling it. I mean, that's where I see so many other people get it wrong, is that a property manager, they're calling you with a problem.
Yeah.
They don't want you to just, okay, it's not, they want you to figure out the problem and solve the problem, and not just, well, no, it's the HVAC leaking. I mean, I've just had so much luck in my past, and I mean, hopefully in my future, I mean, that's what I want to be doing, is training other service techs on how to look outside the box.
Yeah.
Because they're calling you to solve a problem. And if it involves opening up a HVAC unit, putting some weather stripping around it so it's not pulling in moisture during a heavy rain because you got the negative pressure pulling it in, because it only leaks when it rains, so it's got to be the roof. I've heard that 100,000 times, but
sure.
Just being, because they don't really care about the cost. It's about, they don't want the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's, like you said, it could be shutting down their business, which is how they make their money. And that could be a whole lot more money than the cost of this little repair.
Yep.
Right. And so let's just get this repair done. I had one of my first commercial roofs I ever got on. I knew I was over my head. And so I called a buddy, and I was like, hey, I need a supervisor, essentially to come out here with me and make sure I don't, screw something up. But it was a brand new building in Superior, Colorado. They had just gotten done with it. They're getting ready to open like the next week. It was like medical office building, and, really nice. And they were like, we've got this leak coming in and we don't know about the roof. And we went and looked at, we're looking all over the roof, trying to find, there's a few little punctures that maybe are suspect. Ended up, it was plumbing that was leaking.
I've had that.
And, and it was, and it was actually underneath some suspect little, damage on the roof. But we went up there, and I was amazed how much this brand new roof, there were tools left up there. There were nails left up there. There were just, all these random things. And I'm just like, makes me cringe. Like, why are, all these things, and it was, there's no trees, there's nothing that's dropping anything on this roof. But, and we went up there and looked around at the roof, and we're like, well, you got hit with a 3-inch hailstorm. We can probably get this roof bought right out of the gate. And they ended up, they're like, no, we're going to go back to the contractor that installed it. And I'm like, cool. They made, even me not being a commercial roofing expert, I'm like, they made 15 different mistakes throughout this roof. And it's, they didn't get it clean. But yeah, go ahead and go back to them. Good idea.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I got one thing I'm going to bring up. That's the mix. I know Nashville, you see it all the time, how commercial and residential have just become so intertwined because of all the commercial roofing systems going on. Your tall and skinny buildings, it's just, there's been a big influx in it. And I'm just trying to get y'all's take on that, because basically it's, a homeowner is definitely calling a resident. I mean, most commercial contractors, they don't really market. I mean, they might mark, but they're not putting ads out there and stuff like that. They have their client, or they're doing new construction. I'm just seeing a lot of issues with actual, basically the initial installation of the whole envelope of the building. And I guess what I'm getting at is, I think the line between commercial and residential is beginning to gray, especially in these larger metropolitan areas, like growing areas like Nashville, Tennessee, where we have all these hybrid systems going, where you got shingles on the page, you got TPO membranes. I mean, and I guess that's kind of why I have dabbled. I mean, my whole career has been commercial, but I've also I have multiple relationships with multiple residential contractors for that reason right there. Because I want to be that person to call when you need some help. Not necessarily. I just want to be able to. If I say I die tomorrow, all this knowledge I had in my, what is it now, 28 years doing what I do in commercial problem solving, past 16, just problem solving, it's gonna go to waste.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it just be a new standard now. I mean, especially with how, there is such an increase in the need for homes, and these houses are getting put up so quickly and stuff. I mean, the home inspection is great, but definitely, at least with the roofing system, at bare minimum, have a roofing and exterior contractor look at everything a little bit more thoroughly before you go in and complete the real estate transaction. Because, anything from, I've been on dozens of properties that were purchased less than a year prior, and the house is only a year or two old and has multiple issues and water coming in all these different places that could have potentially been prevented or at least caught on the front end. And nothing breaks my heart more than going to a client's house of a house they bought and didn't expect to have to touch any of that. Like, hey, I bought a new house so that I wouldn't have any of these issues, and now I'm having all of these issues, and it's not covered as a potential covered peril in my policy. It's just on me to get these repairs made, and I wasn't expecting these expenses, and especially with like your tall and skinnies, most of the time it's some sort of single ply membrane. Most of the time it's a cement fiber, so you're talking about tearing into a lot of expensive materials to be able to make these repairs. And so I think anybody that's in the market for buying a house now needs to connect with a contractor that they trust, that can give them a detailed inspection, or somebody like you that can do some thermal imaging, to make sure that everything's nice and tight, and that they're, barring any significant weather event, they should be okay.
Right.
So on the new construction, I think a lot of people don't know this. A home builder, so on the residential side, they have liability of the structure, the structural stability of that building, for typically 10 years. And it varies per state, but most states are about 10 years. But they also have essentially a full liability on the whole construction for 1 year. And then they'll have some of the major components like the roof is 2.
Okay.
I think Tennessee
I've seen
may
some
be 4.
3 or 4.
And that's, again, something that varies by state.
Yep.
But if it is a very, very new house and you got in there and 6 months later it's leaking, that builder is liable. Now, there's all sorts of different remedies for
correct.
A good builder. You're going to go, hey, my roof is leaking. I bought this house 6 months ago.
Right.
They're going to go, let me go fix it.
Yep.
But if not, there's obviously, either arbitration or legal remedies to those things. But
I would definitely advise potentially the legal route, at least a consultation with an attorney, even if that costs you a couple $100, because it could save you tens of thousands.
Well, oftentimes builders will have a arbitration clause that doesn't allow that home buyer to take them to litigation. Which it can still get settled properly through arbitration, but it prevents everybody from having to spend a bunch of money with attorneys and them having to pay penalties and all that sort of, so they're capping their liability, but it can't actually
goes to subcontracts too. When I'm working for a commercial contractor, that's out of the equation.
Litigation. It's a smart thing to include in your thing. So back to what you were talking about in terms of the lines being blurred between commercial and residential. I think that is part of the consequence of, you've got these large commercial companies that aren't doing a lot of business development. They're focusing on service work, or they're doing repairs and that type of thing. And I think a lot of those guys don't pay a lot of attention to the insurance market or the full replacement market. And, and I get that, But at the same time, there are people that is the appropriate solution for, right? And so the only people that are going after that are a lot of times the guys that are seeing zeros and going, oh my gosh, there's a lot of money to be made right here.
Yep.
And, and I'm going to send it to my PA and it's going to get handled. And, and a lot of times they'll subcontract it out to that company that's doing the service work and all that sort of stuff. But then, they're getting a nice slice of it themselves. But I guess with anything, like we talked about, residential oftentimes is simpler. And so it's easier to learn. The stakes aren't as high. You screw up one residential job, you probably won't put your whole company out of business.
Yeah.
Right.
You screw up one commercial job, you might.
Yeah.
You very well might. And so I think being able to impress upon people, if you're going to get into commercial, pretend you're studying for the bar, right? Like learn every aspect you possibly can and learn from some of those bad YouTube videos. Learn from, the guy that will let you carry his ladder and buy his lunch to go out and look over his shoulder for the day. Learn from whoever you can. And sometimes that can be competitors, especially in another market where they'll invite you and go, hey, yeah, man, I've got no plans on ever working in Tennessee. Come out here to XYZ state and, you can follow me for a week and I'll show you everything that I'm doing here and you can go take it back to Tennessee or wherever.
Yeah, I have a lot of quite a few of them relationships across the whole entire states here.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I think guys are crazy that open their own roofing companies and don't leverage other business owners, at least like in other states or something like that. Like, obviously shout out to Aaron Christie up there at Indy Roof. I hit him up a year and a half ago or something like that and was just like, hey dude, I really love what you've built up there. I respect it a lot. I really would love to see myself in that position one day. And, what are the chances that I could come up there one day? I'll pay to be able to see and get a little peek behind the curtain, see what you do and pick your brain about how you got to where you are. And those types of phone calls and meetings and stuff will collapse so much time for you. And it would blow your mind how many, 30, 50, $100 million companies will just give you the keys to everything. And then you've just got to go out there and do the work.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is shout out to Aaron Christie. I'm going to send you this video, but I want you to come down here to Nashville and instead of just going to concerts and hanging out and not calling me, come be on our podcast. So, no, I really like Aaron and, a good example. And like you said, there are a ton of people that'll let you come and do that with them. If you ask, you don't have to be in some paid club to, network with other contractors. And that's one good reason to go to the conferences, go meet other people that are your competition, but not your competition. And you might go in there and go, hey, there's these 3 things that weren't even on my radar that they're doing really well that I need to be doing. And now I see exactly how it works. And you might see a couple of things where you're like, oh, they've got this issue and I'm going to make sure I don't have that issue. Or maybe there's things you can help them with that, even if they're that, much bigger company than yours, you might have that one piece figured out that you can help them.
Correct.
Because a lot of times the guys that are willing to do that, they're not necessarily money driven, they're purpose driven.
Oh yeah. And because really at that point they don't need the money usually. Most of those guys, they're just like, heck yeah, I've been in your shoes.
They need the money to
They want to quote unquote
a few $1,000s to come watch me.
Correct.
I'd rather quote unquote level the playing field.
Yeah. So, well, Double D, what do you have? Like, what's one piece? I know that you're big in commercial roofing. I know that you have an amazing relationship with Jesus. I know that you have an amazing relationship with your wife. But before we wrap up, what is one thing that you want to leave to our viewers, listeners, and our industry? Like, what's the one thing that if they don't take anything else away, take away this? Go.
I guess from my experience, it's not easy. I mean, worked for companies many years, thought it would be easy. It's not easy. So welcome anybody to go out and start up their own thing, but just be prepared. You got to put in the work. Sometimes you might go without a check. You might go many weeks without a check. Got to pay your employees. Got to pay your vendors. Just don't think. A lot of people, you hear all this stuff on social media. Oh, you can come in here and just, it's so easy, blah, blah, blah. This, well, if easy is what you want, this ain't really the business for you. That's just my 2 cents on that right there.
I love it. Well, dude, I'm glad you came.
Glad you had me, man.
Thanks for coming on.